going to start up our next game, and I don't feel like I really need to show you the process of how to start a game file yet anymore, so you should be able to do this on your own. I'm calling mine Endless Runner. Doesn't matter what you call it, it's just your file folder name, so it's however it's easily recognizable for you. You could call it the second game or second 3D game or whatever you want to call it. But once it gets all set up, we should have an empty scene. Shouldn't have anything going on and should be all set up the way you left it. But it should be completely empty. Nice and fresh project to start out with. So let's go ahead and do some folder management. Let's rename our scenes folder to _scenes. Let's create a folder for our scripts. And I'm going to also go ahead and make a folder for 3D models because I know I'm going to have some 3D objects that I'm going to be using from my graveyard set. I'm going to create a folder called sprites because my background is going to be flat images. And I don't like that this is up at the top, so let's rename this actually. So I'm going to call this environment models. Sure. So this is just going to be the stuff that I'm placeholder placing everything in here. I'm going to start today by setting up our scene and getting it ready to go, and then we're going to go ahead and make the parallax effect. So let's go ahead, create a plane just to start with, so we have a floor in our scene, and right now it's in a location that the camera can't even see it. Let's see where the camera is pointing. Maybe the camera needs to be adjusted. Oh yes, there we go. Let's turn. There we go. So we're looking at the scene kind of from this perspective. And then we'll move our camera on the X scale right here in the middle. And our plane, let's move that closer to us. Would that be this way? Nope. How about Z? There we go. Let's move it closer to us. And then we're going to stretch it out so that it goes to the edges of the scene so that it's just kind of a floor now. We have a space that is a floor. I'm going to create an empty object. I'm going to call this empty object my background. And I'm going to import my things that I need in my background. So I'm going to go to Finder, and I have created a folder that I've got my stuff hanging out in. So game design, my Endless Runner assets. And so I have these backgrounds. I believe it's this one. Yep. I'm going to drag this whole folder into my sprites folder. And my sprites folder has my layers. And I'm going to rename this layers folder to background. So everything is organized still, everything's neat and tidy, and you can see these are all the background pieces I need. Now I can't drag these in yet. They don't do anything because I have to change what type of sprite they are. So whenever you import something like this, it'll just set it to default texture and it won't be usable. So on each one I'm going to have to go through and change the texture type to sprite 2D and UI, and then hit apply. And now it's got like this little drop-downy thing, and that means I can place it into my scene. So I'm just going to do that to all of them. Nope, that's wrong. And ideally, I'll click the right one each time. Sometimes you just feel like you're just constantly clicking the wrong things. Does that ever happen to you guys? It always happens to me. Alrighty. Now these are drag and droppable, so I'm going to start throwing them in to my scene. Just one at a time. If you try to put them in all at once together, what's going to happen is Unity's going to get confused. So just do them individually instead of trying to be lazy, even though it's tempting. And we need to, you can notice this is not at all how this is supposed to look, right? So I'm going to go to each one and change my layer order to what I need it to be. So they're all set to 0, which means they're all just overlapping each other. So if I set this to 1, 2, 3, 4, and finally 5. Now they're all in the correct order. I'm actually going to go through and rename all these so that they match. The order that they are in the layer. Not really for any particular reason other than it helps me remember what layer I put things on. Alright, and right now our floor is getting in our way, so I'm going to take my entire background and drag it up like so. And I want to be able to see some of that ground on there. Maybe I'll bring this down just a little bit so it takes up less of my scene because it's kind of less important than my background picture. There we go. And now I've got these edges hanging off, and this is a pretty simple fix. What I'm going to do, I'm going to select all of this by clicking on the top one, holding Shift and clicking on the rest, and then duplicating them with Control D for you. And then I'm going to take all of these and move them to the side. Now I know specifically that this file is 19 is the size, so if I come over here and I change this X position to 19, it'll move everything exactly to the right spot where it will snap together really nice. So I'm just going to do it that way. But if you don't know your size, you can do it manually by hand. It just takes more thought. And then select all this, duplicate it again, and I'm going to set this to -19. It didn't quite click into place. Oh, there we go. Pretty close. I don't see a seam there. All right, we're good. So now it fills up my whole screen. And the reason that I have it skewed out extra down here is because whenever we set this to scrolling, I want to make sure that I have plenty of extra room on either side for the scrolling mechanism. I'm also going to group up all of my layers now. So I'm going to take both of the zeros. I'm going to drag them on to the 0 and do that for all of them. Now that everything is grouped and I have kind of my scene set up, I'm actually going to start working on the code and make it so that this is moving to the left. Now, I could make it so that this whole scene just moves to the left at a constant speed and everything moves at the same speed, and that is fine. But what we're doing is called the parallax effect, which makes it so that the scene, things that are moving closer to you are moving faster and things further away move slower. It creates a more realistic looking environment. So that's why we're doing it that particular way. So I'm going to create a script. Down here in scripts, I'm going to create a script. C#. I'm going to call it Parallax Effect. Parallax is spelled Parallax, in case you are curious. Parallax Effect. Got a nice fresh script here, and now we need to go ahead and set up some variables that we are going to use to control the movement of our background. Some things that you might have guessed that we're going to need to do is use the transform.translate to move our objects, our sprites, across the screen, and we are going to need to reference a vector3 for this. So we're going to make a private vector3. Because we're setting it private, we don't need to see this in the inspector. We're going to call this start position, start pause, which we're going to find within our code. We want to make a private float variable. We need to, whenever it scrolls across, eventually we're going to have it repeat. So I'm going to call this repeat distance. And then we're going to have a serialized field because we are going to want to set from within the inspector the amount of parallax effects that is going to be applied to each level. So I'm going to call this parallax effect. And first thing we need to do whenever the game starts up, we need to find the start position. So start pause, and then we need to set this equal to transform.position. Just saying find the position, and we're going to call that our start position. And then in our update, I tabbed too many times. Oh no. Oh, this terrible thing's happening. Okay, let's get rid of this extra thing. All right. Having a bad typing day, y'all. All right, so we want to move our sprites from right to left. So we're going to do a transform.translate, and then we're going to give it some parameters. So let's just say transform.translate, which is something we've used before, I'm pretty sure. And then we want to take the vector3.left for how we want it to move. We want it to multiply that by time.delta time so that it is scaled to a specific time, to real seconds. And then we're going to multiply that by the parallax effect, which we'll assign within the inspector. So just to show you how this looks so far, we're going to have to apply this to each one of our groupings here. So I'm going to collapse these down so I don't accidentally apply it to something very wrong. And let's see, what layer do we want to move first? This one will be pretty obvious. Okay, so I'm going to take my 4 layer. I'm going to drag my parallax effect script onto it. Let's say that this moves at a speed of, say 10. It's probably a little fast, but let's see what it looks like. So at this point, it should just move across the screen, which it is doing, and then eventually it runs out because I don't have it set to repeat yet, but it is in fact moving across. I have maximize on play turned on. I'm going to turn that back off so we can still see everything in the inspector. So I'll show you what this looks like from the scene view. Everything is collectively moving to the left, and then it just keeps going endlessly forever. So what we need to do now is adjust our script so that it repeats, and we're going to do this in a kind of unique sort of way. We're going to add a component. We're going to add a box collider, a component, to our scene. We're going to use this box collider to tell our script how to, or where to wrap and repeat. So we're going to edit the collider. We want it to go all the way to the edge of what we have, like so. And click off of the edit so that it stays where it is. That looks pretty close. I'm hoping that it goes smoothly. So we've got this collider on here so that we can access the information on the collider and use that to tell it how to wrap around. So we're going to use this repeat distance right here. We're going to set repeat distance equal to get component, which should be obvious. We should fill this with box collider. And our box collider has parentheses after, dot size dot x. So it's finding basically how big is the box collider, and then we're going to divide that by 2. Because we want it to go basically like across and then back over. And then we need to check in the update if it goes beyond a certain point to reset where the position is and make it appear to the viewer as if it is looping. So we're going to say if transform.position, which means its current position, .x, so on the x-axis, is less than start pause .x minus repeat distance, and then inside of that we need these. So it's basically saying if it is less than the start position's x minus the amount of repeat distance, we need to reset it. So we're going to say transform dot position equals start position. So bring it right back to where it was supposed to start at. So let's see if it resets now. watching it scroll across. So it does, but not very well. You can see it kind of has like a jarring moment where it's scrolling past, but resetting in a weird spot. So let's look at this and see what we've done wrong. Alrighty, I took a quick break for a second because the script didn't play initially correctly. It was doing this weird jumping thing. My solution, I deleted all of my background stuff and just re-added it, and re-added the box collider, and then after the box collider added the script, and everything works perfectly now. So it's still a mystery to me because I didn't change the script. But if you run into a similar problem, that is how I solved mine. I got rid of all of my assets and then just reset up the scene basically. But it does play now, so whenever I hit play, you can see the parallax effect. So the stuff in the background is going very slow, the stuff in the foreground is going very fast. You can see down here where it actually like decides to respawn, and I have one of them selected so you can kind of see the box collider it's calculating from. So it hits this point and then it just bounces back to the other side. And everything wraps really, really nicely. As soon as it hits negative 19, basically, it just goes boop and goes back to the front, which is exactly what I wanted. The scrolling looks perfect. It looks seamless up here, only we know the secret, that is that there are 3 looping layers going on in the background. Of course, on mine, I don't have to have the very, very, very background set to any kind of speed because it's just one solid color. So it's the only one that doesn't have the script applied to it. Yours might be slightly different. It's kind of up to you. I definitely would make sure you don't have anything that would look weird if it loops back and forth. Like if you have like a sun going across the screen, that would look super wild. But if you got an asset off the asset store, they're usually designed not to include weird things like that. So basically, this is how you set up a parallax effect. And I'm going to next go into getting my character added to my scene and set up so that whenever we start the game, they start running automatically because we want this to be an endless runner, and I don't want the player to really have any input on speed. I want it to just constantly move forward at a steady pace. Think along the lines of Flappy Bird. It just starts moving, and then the only thing you control is how far up or down the character moves. In our case, we're going to want to jump and move in that kind of horizontal direction. So now you need to find your character asset and get that imported into your game. Sometimes things can break if you directly import it to your game, so make sure you make a copy of your file before you add it in to make sure that nothing terrifying happens. So go ahead and get your asset and we will move on to the next video.